The hum of the command center was broken only by the occasional crackle of static and the soft beeps of incoming messages. Sierra Hayes, blonde and poised as ever, stared at the screen in front of her, her fingers hovering above the control console. The seconds ticked by as if they were minutes, each one drawing her closer to the moment she would finally connect the link, an operation so sensitive that even the air seemed to hold its breath. But as her hand reached for the final switch, something odd flashed on the screen, a brief flicker of data that didn't belong. A code, a pattern, a secret buried deep in the heart of the system. She paused, unsure if it was a glitch, a bug, or something far more deliberate. Her gut told her it was the latter. What was that? Now, before we dive deeper, tell me, where are you watching from? The sterile glow of the command center was both familiar and unervingly quiet as Sierra Hayes sat, hands poised above the console like a pianist ready to begin a delicate, yet crucial, performance. Her blonde hair was pulled back neatly in a ponytail, the strands almost glowing against the dark military fatigue she wore. She wasn't tall, but her presence filled the room like a force, commanding attention without a single word. Around her, the air was tense, not with fear, but with anticipation. Officers and technicians bustled about, their eyes occasionally flicking toward her, each one aware, without a doubt, that the woman in the center of the room wasn't just another officer. She was the officer, and she had earned every inch of respect that came with it. The mission ahead was straightforward, at least on paper. Establish the satellite link, confirm the encrypted signals, and ensure that everything remained secure. It should have been routine. But Sierra wasn't one to rely on routine. Not when the stakes were this high. She had seen too much, lived through too many operations where routine had been the difference between success and failure. So, she had learned to trust her instincts. Her gut had never steered her wrong. Not once. And now, as the seconds on the clock ticked away, she felt that familiar prickle of unease at the back of her neck. The console in front of her flickered again, and Sierra's fingers froze. There it was, that anomaly. A brief surge of static that twisted across the screen, followed by an odd string of characters, almost imperceptible to anyone else. But Sierra had seen it before. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't a system malfunction. It was something deliberate, something hidden. But what? She leaned in, her eyes narrowing as her fingers moved over the keys, quickly isolating the code. It wasn't military standard, nor was it any kind of familiar encryption she had encountered in her years of service. It was something else, something off the books. Her pulse quickened, but she didn't flinch. She had trained for moments like this. She had been in the darkest corners of the world, and here, in the sterile command center, the darkness was no less real. The problem, however, was that she didn't know what she was dealing with. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, a voice cut through the stillness of the room. It was Captain Wells, a tech specialist who had been monitoring the system's performance. The satellite link is almost up. We're a few seconds away. Sierra didn't take her eyes off the screen. She didn't need to. She could feel the tension in the room shift. Everyone knew the importance of this moment. If she completed the link, the operation would proceed smoothly. But if there was even the slightest hitch, if the system wasn't as secure as it seemed, it could unravel everything. "Give me a minute," she said, her voice steady, betraying no hint of the growing anxiety that clawed at her gut. Something's not right. She watched the code again, her mind racing. She needed to decide now. Was it a harmless blip? A mistake? Or something more insidious? She didn't know, and not knowing was the worst feeling of all. For a brief second, her mind flickered back to the days before she had earned the rank she now held. Back to the battles she had fought, some won, some lost. To the dusty corners of conflict zones, to nights spent in the harsh, artificial light of military command rooms just like this one. She remembered the faces of the soldiers, the lives she had saved, and the ones she couldn't. She remembered the promises she had made, the sacrifices that had come at too high a cost. And in this moment, as the clock continued to tick, all those memories seemed to converge, sharpening her focus. She didn't blink. She didn't look away. With a single motion, she pressed a button, bringing up the system diagnostics. "Damn it," she muttered under her breath. There it was again, the strange code, flashing across the screen, embedded deep in the encryption files. She could feel her pulse thudding in her ears now, louder than the hum of the electronics around her. "Captain," she said, her voice low but firm. "Cancel the link. Now." The command echoed through the room, and suddenly, all eyes were on her. She heard the sharp intake of breath from Captain Wells as he processed her order, but Sierra didn't give him time to question her. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice hesitant, but she could hear the underlying trust. They all knew what her instincts had done for them over the years. "I'm sure," she replied, her tone unflinching. The command center seemed to still for a moment, as if holding its breath. Then, Captain Wells quickly moved to cancel the link, and Sierra leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. The silence was thick, pressing down on her shoulders. She had done it. But what now? What was that code, and who was behind it? She couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. Someone who knew exactly what they were doing. And somehow, they were always one step ahead. As she stared at the now blank screen, a sense of unease settled in her chest. This wasn't a simple malfunction. It never was it? She had faced enemies in the field, on the front lines, but this, the unseen enemy, hiding behind a line of code, was different. And she had a sinking feeling that this was just the beginning. The tension in the command center grew thick as Sierra Hayes sat motionless, her eyes fixed on the darkened screen before her. The silence in the room felt oppressive, almost suffocating. The usual hum of equipment and quiet murmurs of the tech team had been replaced by the eerie stillness of uncertainty. The flicker of that strange code had cast an undeniable shadow over the operation, and Sierra's mind was racing. She had been in situations where the stakes felt high, but something about this odd disruption in the system, was different. It felt personal. Captain Wells, the tech specialist, stood to the side, his posture stiff as he watched Sierra. He had been with her on countless missions, seen her face the most harrowing of situations. But now, the way she was locked in place, seemingly waiting for something to happen, made him uneasy. "Ma'am," he ventured quietly, not wanting to disturb the tense air, but knowing he had to speak. "Do you think it was someone from the inside?" Sierra didn't move, her gaze unwavering as she processed the question. It was a valid one. There had been whispers in the past about internal threats, rogue operatives who had gone off-book, corrupt officers, and disgruntled personnel with access to sensitive systems. But she wasn't ready to entertain that idea just yet. If someone on the inside was responsible, then this wasn't just a system breach. It was a betrayal of everything they had worked for. But the more she thought about it, the more the possibility seemed to linger in the air like an unsolved riddle. "No," she finally said, her voice steady but taut with an edge of something dangerous. "This is something else. Whoever's behind this isn't inside. They know too much." Captain Wells shifted uncomfortably, but he didn't argue. He knew better than to question her judgment when she was this certain. Instead, he began to tap away at the console, rerunning diagnostics, trying to trace the origins of the rogue code. But it was like trying to catch smoke with bare hands. It was there, then gone, always just out of reach. Sierra leaned forward, staring at the blank screen in front of her. The faint glow of the other monitors seemed to cast a pale light across her face, but it did little to ease the growing discomfort settling deep in her bones. She wasn't sure what she was expecting, someone to break in through the doors, perhaps, or a sudden explosion of alarms signaling a full breach. But nothing came. The silence, though oppressive, remained undisturbed. But then came the voice. It was clear, crisp, and carried an unmistakable weight, like a sudden crack of thunder in an otherwise calm sky. "Steel Ghost, in command." Sierra's spine straightened, her fingers gripping the edge of the console as the words echoed through the room. It was a phrase that, to anyone in the military, would have instantly signaled the presence of someone with far more power than any officer could wield. Steel Ghost wasn't just a call sign. It was an institution. A title earned through combat, sacrifice, and loyalty. Earned through things no one could truly understand unless they had lived it. And Sierra Hayes, at the age of 27, was one of the very few who had earned that title. Her heart beat faster, but her exterior remained as calm as ever. The room, however, did not share her calm. The air seemed to freeze. The staff, who had been moving about the room with quiet confidence moments before, suddenly paused. Every single person in the room knew the weight of the words that had just been spoken. Steel Ghost. It wasn't just a call sign. It was a command, a directive to follow without question, no matter the situation. It was a title that made men stand straighter, made them listen, and made them hesitate, knowing that the person who held it could do things no one else could. Sierra didn't have to look around to know the effect it had on her team. She could feel their eyes on her, could sense the collective breath they were all holding. They weren't looking at her as just another officer anymore. They were looking at the woman who had earned a reputation in the darkest corners of the world, the one who had survived what others hadn't, and the one who commanded more respect in a single glance than most officers could ever dream of. The title wasn't just something she wore. It was something that defined her, something that had been forged in blood, sweat, and countless nights where survival was the only goal. Sierra didn't move. She didn't acknowledge the voice over the radio. Instead, she focused on the screen in front of her, fighting the urge to let her emotions surface. The world outside might have recognized her as the Steel Ghost, but here, she was just another officer in a room full of people trying to piece together an unfolding mystery. And that, more than anything, kept her grounded. It kept her from being consumed by the weight of the title that had followed her for years. "Captain," she said, her voice calm, but there was an underlying sharpness to it that everyone in the room understood. "Prepare the team. We're not backing down. We move forward with the operation, on my command." Her words broke the silence, and the room sprang to life. Everyone, from the youngest technicians to the senior officers, fell into motion. This wasn't a moment to second guess. They were all professionals, and when Steel Ghost gave an order, they moved without hesitation. But behind the swift efficiency of the team, there was an undercurrent of confusion and awe. They had all seen her in action before, but now, after the call sign had echoed through the room, they understood something more. This wasn't just about the mission. This was about something much bigger, something none of them fully understood. Whatever was happening now, Sierra Hayes wasn't just involved. She was leading, and anyone who questioned her authority would quickly learn why her title was more than just words. Captain Wells turned back to her, his expression a mix of disbelief and admiration. "Understood, ma'am," he said, his voice firm but with a note of respect. He quickly passed the word, and soon, the room was alive with activity. The team began to prepare, gathering intel, checking systems, and verifying connections. The operation was on. There was no turning back now. Sierra's mind, however, remained locked on the strange code that had flashed across the screen moments before. It wasn't just an anomaly. It was a message. Someone had orchestrated this, a plan that was now set into motion, whether she was ready or not. And though she had only moments to make sense of it, Sierra Hayes was certain of one thing. The game had just changed, and she wasn't going to lose. Not this time. The command center hummed with the urgency of action. Every officer, every technician, had a singular focus now, to execute the operation and unravel the mystery behind the strange code that had threatened to derail it. But as the team worked feverishly, Sierra Hayes sat, her gaze locked onto the central screen, her mind far from the visible chaos unfolding around her. The cold, calculated focus she wore so well was now layered with something deeper, an instinctual understanding that this moment was just the beginning. She wasn't alone in this battle. Every soldier in the room, every tech specialist and officer, moved as one. But as Sierra observed them, she couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't just fighting against time, or even against the enemy. They were fighting against something much more insidious, a force, a shadow, lurking just beyond their reach. And that, above all else, was what terrified her. This wasn't a typical adversary, and they had no idea what they were truly up against. Minutes passed like hours as the team worked through the protocol, securing the satellite link once more. But the real battle was still unfolding, somewhere beneath the surface. Sierra knew that the strange code had come from somewhere, and someone, far more dangerous than she'd ever encountered. She wasn't just patching a link. She was pulling the threads of a web that would eventually reveal a far-reaching conspiracy, one that would touch every part of the military structure she'd spent her life defending. Whoever was behind this wasn't just trying to disrupt an operation. They were orchestrating something much larger. The voice over the radio had been a warning, and Sierra Hayes had recognized it immediately. Steel Ghost, in command, was a command call sign, one used only when something beyond the ordinary was at play. But it wasn't just her title that commanded respect. It was the silent history that came with it. The battles fought, the lives lost, The moments when victory seemed impossible, yet she had somehow always emerged victorious. This was her domain, and whoever was trying to breach it, whoever thought they could manipulate the systems that protected this country, would soon learn how wrong they were. "Ma'am," Captain Wells's voice cut through her thoughts, pulling her back to the present. "The satellite link is up and secure. But we've got a bigger problem." Sierra turned slowly, her eyes narrowing as she met his gaze. He had never sounded so serious. "Go ahead, Captain." "The code," he continued, his voice low. "It's coming from an untraceable location. We've managed to block the access point, but it's just the surface of something much deeper. This wasn't just a breach, it's a signal. A warning. Someone knew we would be here." Sierra's stomach tightened. The realization was chilling. Whoever had sent the code wasn't just targeting the operation. They knew exactly where she would be and what she would be doing. But who? And why? She had never encountered such a precise threat. One that not only understood the mission, but knew how to manipulate it, how to hide in plain sight. The room fell silent for a moment, as everyone waited for her next move. Sierra didn't flinch. She had been here before, standing at the precipice of the unknown, facing down enemies that others had failed to understand. But this was different. She had always fought for the men and women beside her. But now, with the walls closing in, she knew that this battle wasn't just about survival. It was about something far more personal. This wasn't just about keeping secrets safe. It was about protecting everything she had fought for, everything she had built. And that was something no one, not even the most skilled adversaries, could take from her. "Get the base commander on the line," Sierra ordered, her voice sharp. Now, as the team scrambled to make the necessary connections, Sierra's mind raced. She needed more information. She needed to know what was really happening, who was pulling the strings. Whoever it was had orchestrated this operation with such precision that it was almost as if they had been watching her for years. It wasn't just an infiltration. It was a setup. "Ma'am, we've got the commander," Captain Wells called, his voice tight with urgency. "He's on the line." Sierra didn't hesitate. "Colonel," she said, her tone resolute, "this is no longer just an operation. We've been compromised, and I need all available intelligence on who's been tracking this mission. Someone's out there, and they're not just trying to breach our systems. They're trying to destroy everything we've built." The colonel's voice crackled over the line, thick with disbelief. "You're sure? This goes beyond a standard operation breach." "I'm sure," Sierra replied, her mind already several steps ahead. "We've only scratched the surface, sir. Whoever is behind this knows exactly what they're doing. We need to move fast before they strike again." There was a pause, a long breath on the other end. Finally, the colonel spoke again, his voice laced with something Sierra didn't quite recognize. "Fear." "Understood, Lieutenant Colonel. I'll mobilize the team immediately. Stay sharp." The connection cut, and the room seemed to exhale all at once. But Sierra didn't relax. Not yet. There was something dark on the horizon. Something that, no matter how many times she had faced it before, would be unlike anything she had ever encountered. She stood, her gaze sweeping over the room. The team was ready. They were prepared. But there was a deeper, gnawing question that lingered in her mind, refusing to let go. Who was the puppet master behind the strings? The lights flickered for a brief second, as if in response to her thoughts, and the distant hum of the command center seemed to fade into the background. The battle for their survival had just begun. But this time, the enemy wasn't just visible. It was waiting, lurking in the shadows, watching her every move. And Sierra Hayes wasn't about to lose. Not this time.